Greetings from Earth. I'm from the planet Mars.
Welcome everyone to our second meeting of this term. For everyone that showed up to hear about Egypt, I'm afraid we're not going to hear much about Egypt tonight. So I don't think everybody knows that tonight we're having Tony Busick speak with us. Before we get into that, just a couple of quick housekeeping notices. Our annual general meeting is 2 weeks from this coming Sunday here. And in addition to the annual general meeting, we're going to have an election for the national president as well, as just in conjunction with that. It won't take any extra time. 2 weeks from tonight is our study group. Again, it's here at 8 o'clock on Friday night. Anybody's interested in membership, please put a note next to your name in the visitor's book. Diane's not with us tonight, our secretary, but if she sees a note in there, she can mail you out an application form. You don't already have one. There's been a couple inquiries in that. And everybody knows where the facilities are. You're free to come and go. We speak for about an hour or so and have refreshments, tea, coffee in the kitchenette in the background, and then we try to get out of here by about 9:30 after lock up. So when you finish, you can put your chair along the side. That would be really helpful. And tonight we have Tony Busick. Am I saying that right? I don't say much of anything in this country, but anyway.
You're clothing your language.
Speaking to us on cloning of the soul, which should be very interesting. And I'll just let you go ahead, Tony.
Well, thank you, Melanie.
There's nothing worse in the past. I was going to say, we've had trouble in the past with people discussing and asking questions and etc. So it would be really nice if people could refrain from questions and comments throughout the chain of presentation, and we have it's allowable 10-15 minutes of discussion and questions at the end of this presentation, and then after that, some fellowship. Sorry, I had to mention that.
Just like to mention firstly that this was a bit of a rush. In fact, I finished writing it today. So there hasn't been a lot of practice involved in this, although I have known a bit about the history of the subject for a while. Pretty much like the history of ufology, and that, and I've known it for about 30 odd years. It's getting pretty close to the same period of time for that. I was interested in the subject around about the early 1970s, just from a few books that I got hold of, a few of them there in particular, and I'll show you a bit more about them later. But what I wanted to say is that this subject basically has everything. It has science, it has science fiction, it has spirituality, it has drama, comedy, sex, non-sex, and, believe it or not, flying saucers and aliens. the story of cloning holds a great deal of interest. Now, it's filled with excitement and for some hope for the future. For others, it is the path to our moral decay, and to yet others, it is our very road to our own physical and spiritual demise. The subject of cloning is one that obviously holds much interest and yet causes much derision in the community. Now, the reason for this dichotomy is perhaps because of the moral, spiritual and ethical issues associated with it, as much as both the glamorous and horror aspects of the modern science fiction film genre of the same thing. Now, cloning is very closely associated with genetic engineering, perhaps best described as genetic manipulation. Without the advent of genetic engineering, it would not be possible to create clones. Now, there are, of course, the recent claims of CloneAid, the scientific arm of the Raelian movement, stating that it has cloned many children since December 2002. But the history of cloning, whether real or folklore, is long. And if you will permit me, I'll give you a brief overview of its purported history. So, basically, I've divided the known history of cloning into three particular areas. Firstly, scientific, next fraudulent, or possibly fraudulent, and third, science fiction. I've included science fiction because science fiction tends to, what's the word for it? It predicts the future and predicts science, and in fact science does use it as a yardstick often. And if you look at Star Trek, for example, you'll see that efforts on that program to transmit matter have recently been experimented with on this here Earth, and there has been some startling results in that area. So science fiction does play a part. But first of all, I'll just go into the scientific. Now, again, this is something that's not 100% correct because this is known history. And I point out that there is a scientific history that goes back beyond the 1950s. There is suggestions that World War I and II played a big part in the development of genetic engineering, but I couldn't find anything in the short time I had available. And then when you hear of the work of people like Dr. Joseph Mengele, the evil genius, I guess, in World War II, you will perhaps see some of the science fiction element coming into the science. Now, the 1950s and 1960s was particularly good for a Dr. John B. Gurdon, who experimented with frogs. And in fact, he was from the University of Oxford, by the way, and he successfully cloned a frog using what did he use? He took the nuclei from the lining of the intestine of the frogs and implanted it into frogs' eggs that had their nuclei removed, resulting in a number of eggs developing into healthy, normal adult frogs. The frogs were used supposedly because frogs' eggs were larger and easier to manipulate than any other eggs. It makes me wonder why they didn't use bird eggs themselves, but it really did. Now, then comes 1996, a big jump forward in time to Scotland, of course, at Roslin Institute, where Dolly the sheep was successfully cloned. Dolly was cloned in 1996, she was born in 1997. And unfortunately she passed away, I think it was last year, and I believe it was to do with more of a mercy put down because she'd been severely severely arthritis and affected. And the argument by many scientists is that cloning will result in this kind of problem. You'll have genetic defects, and certainly a lot of the cloning of mammals before and since Dolly showed that exact thing, that there was a great deal of animals that were very badly deformed and the like, and yeah, so it was something that I guess I'll get back to the important part of Dolly was the fact that she was the first mammal to be cloned from adult DNA. Previous clones had been from embryos, and I'll explain a little bit about that later and what that means. And basically, because they used an adult DNA cell, they're saying that one of the reasons they believed that Dolly had the severe arthritis was that she was basically not 6 years, 6.5 years old as her actual death age was, but she actually was an extra 6 years above that. She was actually the age of the genetic material that had come from the original cell. That was one suggestion. The other was perhaps that the poor thing had been injured and just developed arthritis naturally. They didn't keep any accurate records of the actual sheep that Dolly was cloned from to be able to prove one way or the other if that was the case or not. So the next thing I'll move on to is the possibly fraudulent, which could possibly also have been real. We don't really know either one. The first is 1978, I take you to this book here, In His Image, by David M. Rorvik. The actual subtitle is The Cloning of a Man. It was written in 1978 and was claimed to be a work of non-fiction. And at that time of writing, David Rorvik was in fact a well-respected science journalist. And he claims that he was approached by a 67-year-old multi-millionaire who wanted to be cloned. He had no heirs, and that's how he wanted to have his heir. Obviously, he didn't want to get involved in any of that messy stuff, and he just wanted a child of his own making, basically. And Rorvik was charged with the duty of seeking out a team of experts to come together to that result, to actually achieve a cloned child. Unfortunately for Rorvik, about 8 months after his book came out, one of the people who he quoted in the book in his bibliography took offence to his name being in the bibliography and sued him for every cent he had. So if there was ever any money in it for Rorvik, he certainly lost it. Whether it was real or not, we don't know. We never will. Because there was a vow of secrecy and everything placed on all the people involved, etc., etc. And of course, the 67-year-old multi-millionaire would now be in his 90s anyway if he was still alive. So that was number one. The second was December 2002, which I mentioned earlier. Clone A, which is the scientific arm of the Radiant movement, claimed to have succeeded in cloning a human that is now alive and well, and that there are others on the way. In fact, yes, they claimed that the first child they brought into the world in December 2002 was one they called Eve. I don't know if they had an Adam. But it was further claimed in their website this month that Clone A had succeeded in cloning many humans that have now been born or are being carried to term as we speak in many different countries, including Australia. Now, what they're also saying there is that those clones weren't developed in any of these countries. They were just where their labs are. I'm not sure where their labs are. I think their labs are probably in Canada, because that's where the Rayleigh centres itself. But the actual clones themselves are now, or the clone children supposedly, are all around the world in their parents' countries and waiting to be born. Now, this is where the flying saucers and aliens comes into the picture. The founder of the Raelians, the self-proclaimed last prophet, in the same vein as Jesus and Buddha, His Holiness Claude Rael, also known as Claude Villeron, this fellow here, claimed in his book, Space Aliens Took Me to Their Planet, written in 1975, that he was contacted by aliens in December 1973, taken aboard their spacecraft and told that he was to be the last prophet. He was advised that he was speaking to the creators of mankind, known as the Elohim, as in the Bible. That there is no God, and that they had created mankind using cloning techniques. On subsequent contacts, they took him to their planet, where Rael met Jesus and other prophets living in peace and harmony. He was asked by the Elohim if he would like a sexual companion for the evening. And the sexual companions are what they call human robots. And human robots, according to the Elohim, are humans who have had no past lives. They simply, one moment they don't exist, the next moment they do. They've got no preconceived thoughts, those kind of things, but they are programmed to do your bidding, whatever it is, whether it be sexual or whatever. And he was asked by the Elohim what he'd like. He had to go to this machine and select the type of thing he wanted. It was, skin colour, height, size, everything you'd imagine that you could ask that you'd want. And needless to say, he couldn't make up his mind, and he chose 6. So he had 6 newborn young women pop out the other end of this machine, and had his way with them all that evening. That's him. One of the interesting things is they claim that in the near future, the cloning technologies of clonage will be so advanced that they will be able to create adult body clones, complete with full memories of a deceased person, etc., thus ushering in an era of immortality. So basically, this is very similar to the ideas expressed in the movie The Sixth Day, which I mentioned below later on. Now, this, of course, is where my ideas of the soul and body tend to blur a bit. Can another soul exist in another soul's physical construct? Those type of things, This soul has been created for me. This body has been created for my soul, and then I vacate that because I die. This is a replica of me, and it's got all my memories, all my thoughts. Is there another soul there willing to take these thoughts and everything and say, well, this is me now, another me? So that I have difficulty with that concept there. I then move on to the science fiction. Now, the 2 perhaps famous books for me in the science fiction side of things are these 2. The first, of course, is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which was written in 1932. And the other, of course, was Ira Levin's The Boys from Brazil. It was written in 1976. Now, Brave New World, if you read the book, you'll know that it talks about cloning, but it doesn't quite have the technological terminology for it. But still, you recognise it as cloning. And of course, in The Voice from Brazil, it definitely is, and I'll explain that in a moment. Now, the first films that I recall was Starman. The next was The Voice from Brazil, the Sixth Day, Star Wars 2, Attack of the Clones, and lastly Godsend, which appeared just a couple of weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah, I told you about it.
That's right. Now, Starman is about an alien who is shot down on his way to Earth by the US forces. And the alien escapes the wreckage in an ethereal body and makes his way to a nearby home. Now, it finds a photo album that has hair in it from the deceased husband of the resident. Now, using the DNA from that hair, he then creates the dead husband and grows to adulthood in his body in minutes. Now, the next one, the boys from Brazil, the evil life real Dr. Mengele, having escaped from a defeated Nazi Germany, set up and continued experimentations into genetic manipulation and cloning techniques in Brazil and Paraguay. Now finally he achieved success in the late 1960s and was able to clone 94 Hitlers, setting up the appropriate family structures and accidents, murders, to coincide with Hitler's life so as to develop Hitlers with the same temperament, logic and charisma as his beloved deceased Führer. Now in the sixth day, it uses the premise that clones can be adult size and ready to go in a couple of hours. The clone is dormant inside a giant tank of fluid until moved to a special chamber to be imprinted with the DNA and the memories of the person to be cloned. Now in Star Wars 2, Attack of the Clones, a more traditional method of cloning is used, where the clones are grown from childhood to adulthood. However, the process of growth is accelerated, taking about 10 years to progress from childhood to adulthood. And finally, in Godsend, we have a more traditional story, I guess, about the tragedy of a family that loses a child and then is given the opportunity to have a child back again using cloning techniques. Is that right?
Yeah, and the soul of the clay was transferred and then clay becomes evil.
Yeah, I've heard that's a remake, I think, now I think of it. You'll probably have noted from these examples that although about the subject at hand, each of the films embraces different aspects or different methods of cloning. And in a while, I'll look at these processes more closely, but now we'll look at the other side of the issue. Now obviously, the best place to start, I guess, is at the beginning. And according to theosophical texts, all life reincarnates as many times as is possible to achieve the nearest state of perfection that it can during the time available in the awakened universe. So in order for the immortal soul to reach this state of perfection, it must reincarnate and thus take on physical form and become mortal. For this descent into mortality to occur, the divine spark moves downwards from the extremely non-material essences to the ever more physical layers of material being. Now, during this descent process, the ethereal body begins to develop and soon is ready to attach to the physical body. Now, in my way of thinking, this is where sex comes in. So I'll now look at reproduction. I'm not going to get too graphic, by the way. This is my reproduction. As you can see, we have this is the cell up here. Now, the red bit here that I've got here is the membrane around the cell. The blue bit I've got here, this is my own characterisation of this, by the way, so it's not in any way scientifically accurate. And it's not to scale. The blue bit represents the nucleus, and this little wiggly bit here represents the chromosomes in here. There are in fact 23 chromosomes in here, and this represents cytoplasm, or whatever it's called, the goo that's in between the cell and the actual membrane itself. And these little squiggly things here are sperms. Now, they actually represent something like 100 million sperm. So my 12 or 13 there, just keep that in mind. I just couldn't do it. Now, when you take into account a skin cell or any other cell of the human body, you'll know that each cell contains 46 chromosomes. In the case of sex cells, you're talking about 23 chromosomes in each cell. So a sperm and an egg both have the same amount of, sorry, I meant to say that was an egg, but I said it was a cell before. Anyway. An egg both have 23 sets of chromosomes. Now, what happens?
Can we extract one part of the DNA?
No, that's not what's happening yet. At the moment, we're talking about what happens in normal sex. And so, when we get down to here, at the moment of when one sperm actually gets through, actually breaks the barrier, it actually takes hundreds of millions of these little fellas to eat away through this barrier for one of them to get through. Now, I don't exactly understand the process, but I know that as soon as one gets through, some kind of chemical reaction or something takes place that creates a hardened membrane around it that prevents any of the others getting through. And that, of course, means that only those 23 get through. And in the process of that happening, this little fellow makes his way around here and starts eating up some of this stuff in here. And in a couple of minutes, I believe, it actually swells to around about the size similar to the nucleus of the egg, which is quite bizarre when you think of the size of it there. And that's where the process of fertilisation has occurred. Now, and the poor little fella's lost his tail, by the way, he gets cut off or something. Let's throw this away. And the next point, the next thing that happens, which takes about a day or so, I think, to occur, is cell division. Cell division happens when so this is when cell division first happens. Again, this isn't to scale, and this is my interpretation of what cell division looks like, because I couldn't find anything in any book to show me what cell division looked like. But basically, the nucleus starts to elongate, and it gets these funny little lines over here that I didn't draw on here that seem to start to stretch it apart, and then you start getting these lines pulling through here and stretching it so that you're actually getting two cells there. Now, in my way of thinking, this again wasn't just a bizarre way of thinking, that's the moment of the spiritual. That's the part where, to me, the divine spark enters the human body. And to me, that's the beginning of life at that level. So that is considered to be an embryo at that level, at that particular space in time, which is only, like I said, about a day after, I think, from memory. So my way of thinking, that's the divine spark, actually, the proof to me of divine spark entering the body in a physical sense and starting the process. Maybe it's just me believing there's a magical thing in conception, but anyway, for me. Now, so I said, okay. So then, from there, so from there, we next go to detail. So maybe 20 to go, or
20 minutes, 9.
each at all. there are several types of cloning. In fact, there's about 4 or 5. This is the first one. Now, this is probably the first one that they used. Now, basically, this is called blasphemy of separation. Now, blasphemy is basically a cell or a couple of cells, or a name for embryos, and a couple of them put together, and that's a blasphemy. Now, what they do is they remove the outer coating of the 2 to 8 cell embryo. Then they place the cells in a special solution that causes them to separate. Once they've done that, because these cells are what they call undifferentiated, it means they haven't actually become a liver cell or an eye cell or whatever, they're simply cells. They are able to become embryos in themselves. So in essence, you have the ability of creating, in a 2 to 8 cell, you have the ability to create between 2 and 8 embryos from each one of these. So it's pretty easy to understand this one. Does it mean that you've actually destroyed that other one? Well, I don't think so, really, because you've actually created 8 out of that 7, 8 out of that 1. You know what I mean? So that one is perhaps the less intrusive, I think, of the processes of cloning. The next one, which is one that this is what I call embryo cloning type 2. It's the blastocyst division, also known as twinning. Now in this process you have actually more cells, as you can see, as part of the embryo, and it may be as many as 32 or whatever, rather than the 8 that you have there, and they just divide it straight down the middle. They use some technique that I don't know of, but they split it straight down the middle, and then they take those 2 lots and put them in the uterus and see if they grow. And if you're lucky, you get a set of identical twins out of it. So it's not quite the horror story of some of the cloning, but still. This is cloning type, embryo cloning type 3. Now in this one, an egg is enucleated, so it's had its nucleus removed. And at the same time, they have a 4 to 8 cell blastomere has its nucleus removed. It's genetic material removed, and that genetic material is then placed in the enucleated egg, and from there, using I think some stimulation such as an electrical impulse, it creates, it fuses the cells together, and eventually they start to turn back into an embryo. The problem I have with this one is because it is that you're actually destroying an embryo to create one embryo. So I just find that one a little bit reprehensible. This is one we've probably all heard about, and this is the one that includes Dolly. Now basically, it's the same thing as the last one. You have an enucleated cell, an enucleated egg, sorry, and you've removed the nucleus from an adult cell. Now the adult cell could be any skin cell, could be any cell at all. And all you have to do then is basically transfer that the nucleus of that adult cell into the enucleated egg put it through the process you put the other one, like you put the other one through with the electrical impulse that's fused the cells together, and the process of cloning may happen. Now keep in mind that to create Dolly, it took 246 attempts. I think she was the 247th. So since then they claim that the technique has improved and they've had better success rates, but still there's something that that is perhaps the horrific type of cloning, because that's the type that talk about cloning humans, cloning Hitler, anything else. Yeah. Now one that's probably a little bit more icky than that one, I guess, is this one here. It's called therapeutic cloning, also known as biomedical cloning. Now in this case, you've got an embryo resulting from cloning via adult DNA cloning, and what they do is they remove the stem cells from it. So this embryo then dies. They then use these stem cells to grow whatever part of the body that they may want. Now this is still a bit science fiction-y, but it's, they claim that it is pretty well out there, that they have created body parts from that before, and that they hope to be able to do more in the future. Again, though, I find it morally questionable because of the fact that you destroy an embryo to create whatever you're trying to create. Yeah. So in the movie, The Sixth Day, instant adult clones are created within hours of death of a person to be cloned, and has all the memories of the deceased up to the moment of their death. Now, as much as we perhaps hope this is science fiction, the CloneAid website, which I think I've got a copy of there somewhere, claims, amongst its other cloning claims, that in a not too distant future, advanced cloning technologies will allow us to even recreate the deceased person in an adult body with all his past experiences and memories, allowing mankind to enter the age of immortality. Now at this point it's probably best to let you know that CloneAid, and consequently the Raelians, do not believe in life before or after death. They are supposedly scientifically minded and disregard all trappings of religious dogma, and yet they call their leader His Holiness Rael. In regards to the attachment of the soul to the body, our Theosophical International President has stated in our last Theosophy in Australia that cloning pertains to the physical body, not to the real human being. The soul is sent out to incarnate in karmically suitable places by the lords of karma. So my personal feeling is that the soul attaches to the human body, as I mentioned before, once cell division occurs. Or perhaps more precisely, that the cell division is evidence of the divine spark attaching itself to the physical world. So although without conscious thought at the physical level at this stage of development, the first cell division is the commencement of life and reincarnation. In this way, it seems possible to believe that adult DNA cloning and adult DNA cloning should offer no more difficulty in access to a soul as any other cell dividing fertilised egg. I'll leave it there.
Does anyone have any questions for Tony or anything you want to discuss?
Is there a reason
Well, he became, his book, his journey, was what created the rallying movement. They followed him.
Yes, no, why the aliens chose him.
Oh, I see.
Does he give a reason for that?
Oh, no. Just he is considered to be the last prophet. And I guess his biggest, he quotes the Bible a fair bit in his book, stating that these are examples of why the examples of the science in the books of the aliens in there, like Ezekiel and all those type of things, you know, the supposed flying saucers there, and also the just the incidences of, you know, the Elohim is a plural term, it's not a singular term, so it doesn't refer to God, it refers to gods, or more precisely to they who came from the sky.
So he wasn't chosen because he was special, he was just part.
That's what he kind of says, he was an ordinary type of like a mechanic of the force.
We didn't know what he was, just someone that we plucked to be his prophets.
Yes, and of course now he's been to their planet.
Does he regard himself as immortal?
A strange idea of immortality, and it's more to do with the sixth day and that type of idea, where the immortality is from the clone. So your clone is given your memories, your thoughts, all those type of things, and it then has your memories from your death back, and then when it dies, its memories are passed on to the next clone who has its memories back to your birth.
So leading from that question, the Jesus he saw and the Buddha he saw on the planet you went to
Were clones. Supposedly, yeah. Right.
So how do I join the rallying movement? So how do I join the rallying movement? That's a more serious question.
Actually, this was their magazine that they believe in free love, by the way. This is,
of course.
and that's all part of the robot experience that he had, I believe. And that's their little book, and I think they've got something here about how to join and that type of thing. So
Before I look at what seriously, it's like the benefits we're claiming outweigh like the side effects for people like that might be ethics of it. So just go with the benefits of it.
well, I don't know whether it's personally when I look at claiming, I mean, I don't know if there's any advantages to it, given that there are other methods of reproduction, and there are natural methods of reproduction, and there are other ways of curing problems for people who have reproduction problems, and there's also, at the end of the scale, if you don't like any of those alternatives, there's adoption. Why create another, and that's just the first, why create another messy thing?
I just say we are like the starting point of it. We're not seeing the whole full picture. If there's ever a benefit at the long term thing of it, we're just skeptical of saying, oh, should we do it or should we not do it?
Well, what do we want? Do we want like the Attack of the Clones in Star Wars, where you haven't built up an army of brilliant soldiers because they're the right size and
But anyway, if it was if I did have that, build up an army of clans, of say, having a soldier who doesn't want to go into battle.
I think clones will probably think the same thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they talk about, cloning and retaining memory, etc., for immortality. Do you think they'd be working backwards to try and purify a clone?
Mm-hmm.
So, not having elements of our history, like aluminium poisoning, children's blood these days, and you think they'd be working backwards to try and purify.
Yeah, and it worries me that the kind of things that they're actually looking at are to do with that type. They're not to do with that type of thing. They're looking more at with the therapeutic claim about extending the life of the person so that, I'm 85 now and the liver's just given out, I'll just get a new liver. I'm 97 now and my pancreas has just died, I'll just get another one then. And in the process, you're killing other embryos.
Possibly that's why people in the Bible live hundreds of years, because it's an old thing. You again.
No, so the aliens was wrong.
Personally, I feel we should be putting moral, ethical and spiritual values before anything. This is why the humans are not progressing, truly progressing in the way they should be, because we're going against the divine principles and we need to get back to them. You might think that's pretty simple, but that's quite a complex thing in itself. So I think that's what we need to be doing. You said, we put aside the side effects.
Yeah.
We put aside all the
If we neutralise the side
we just
effects.
ignore the negatives, side effects, if we just ignore the moral, ethical responsibilities we have to living beings and humans, we ignore that. So we're basically going to say, okay, so let's show our divine wisdom, let's get rid of all that and just be physical beings. It kind of throws out the whole, destroys the purpose of being spiritual beings.
I have no problem with that. I just have a problem with the fact that the only eggs that are retained is the one that's fertilised and all the rest are flushed out of the system anyway. So from that point of view, they're disposed of. So it could be better to use it for something in benefit rather than having them disposed of. So I mean, they're there, they're lost. There could be a gain, and I mean, I'm not against the concept of. I think it's a lot better than having a poor people in India having a kidney ripped out. They walk around with scars because they're going to feed their families. It might be better to artificially manufacture one than to take on the poor of the world to help the rich. So I mean, there are some benefits.
As long as you don't create another poor group of people who farm for poor
With the reincarnation, how does the reincarnated spirit from the spiritual level get into the entity?
Well, one of the quotes from the international president was that she believed that the soul doesn't distinguish between what's a clone and what isn't, because it's a human level. That's the physical level. And in my way of thinking, when you look at the reproduction process and you look at that first division of the cell, and that's where my belief is that the soul enters the physical. If you look at the clone, particularly the adult DNA clone, you'll see that they start the same way. Even though they've gone through a different fertilisation process, they actually start the division the same way. And so in my way of thinking, that point there is the same as the natural point.
So would that recycled spirit, would that spirit be of the person be claimed as well?
Well, that's the thing. The only question I've had of it, and it's from the aliens and from the sixth day idea about the concept of the clone having the memories of the person before them, having the memories of the person before them, having the memories of the person before them, at infinitum, how many clones you go back. And is that clone, or does that clone, adult clone, one that comes into existence as an adult, like they do in the sixth day, does that clone have a soul? And that's difficult.
I personally believe anyone has a soul because we haven't come into life naturally, and therefore this is not my opinion.
But they still come into life naturally.
It's interfered with the divine intervention and the natural cycles of existence, and God in particular, the spiritual creation. This is universal. And so I personally believe that the soul does not enter into an artificial life form or create anything like created artificially. That's my personal belief.
As far as the divine principles go, there is no definition for not divine principle. So we can't very well say we're contravening that because there's no definition of it.
Well, interfering with the natural cycles of existence, not with it.
We've been doing that since the start of creation.
Which are all those things, not being holistic.
We've been doing that since the start of creation. Simply by a mother saying to a son, don't go out with her, or rather you went out with her, we're genetically manipulating the process.
Which is part of being divine. I mean, I believe the morals and ethics have come, the pure ones have come from a higher source.
And also you've got...
Because they're just and pure, but they have to come from a higher level of thinking and existence.
Well, speaking of things coming from a higher source, you think of all the species, humans included, and the plants and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
There is a very, 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 in some cases, extreme rate of egg redundancy built into the process. So to say that it's immoral to dispose of one egg, when and it's been proven over and over again
Oh, I'm not saying
that
that.
in a lifetime a female will discard many, many fertile eggs.
Oh, yeah, they're
So-
not doing that. They're not doing it in their mind. That's happening in a natural process in
Well,
the body.
maybe cloning is a natural process.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the process of the cloning and the scientific side. I'm talking about that the fact that the cloning is going as an artificial thing. I personally do not believe that the soul enters into the body. That's what I'm saying. Whether it be
But is
cloning
cloning an artificial
human
process?
or an animal.
As I was saying, Sharon, I don't think it is an
Right.
artificial process after the fertilisation. Right. Certainly the way it becomes an embryo is a problem when it first starts to body, because you're talking about an unnatural process, right? But when it actually divides and becomes an embryo, that is a natural process.
Yeah, but it's come from an artificial process. This is a person that no one knows the impact on it.
You see, it's like in vitro fertilisation.
So is this guy.
The first in vitro fertilisation child was Lois Brown, wasn't it? 1981, I think she was. Now, no one has ever claimed that she isn't human and that she hasn't got a soul.
No one knows. You can't prove it.
Well, how can you prove that you've got a
The
soul?
soul, the spiritual is not something that most of us see or tangible, but it's there.
No, it
You can feel it, you can sense it. Sometimes we have psychic or spiritual.
Well,
Everything's got soul.
Soul.
Absolutely
Yeah.
everything.
It's
Organic, like I don't believe, organic life has souls.
Yeah, because we've got scientific
that
measures.
artificial things have souls.
They've got scientific
It's not very
measures in the soul, like
Sexually good
psychic
stuff.
skin, sensitive soul, or photography.
Well, you look at other points. I'm very good friends with my motor car. Now, I don't know if it's got a soul or not. It goes every time because I look after it. I'm not sure.
You shoot on God.
You see, when you try to
So
say
that
science,
works.
it's an attack. I mean, we're going to start putting all the principles and
I've got.
what they're doing. Like Theosophical Society means divine wisdom. And I want to start putting this high level thinking, a highest level of existence. If we're trying to get to the divine and have it within us to access it, the highest level of intelligence, I believe, is the divine. And what's happening in human society is they're putting it down the base level. Materialistic intelligence as the highest. And they're giving a lot of credit to scientists and saying they're kind of it, you know. And they're not it. The answers are not with one area. We have to think theosophically. I'm saying this to we have to think divine wisdom.
If you do,
We have to think
ultimately
holistic.
all
We have
is
to start
one.
bringing order
And
in
so,
our think about it.
if all is
Taking-
one, then it's irrelevant anyway.
We're sharing a soul.
Yes. It's all being expressed
It's not
through
about
different,
cloning the plants.
through different
And
appearances.
everybody been doing that for
Well, cloning plants, yeah.
What do you mean?
years before
What's
that.
being expressed through
I
different
wasn't-
appearances?
One soul
Yeah, I've got
is
it.
being
In
expressed
the same
through
way,
each
Well,
of
one
the
other
different
thing-
three
different
types
flavors.
of sex.
But it's the one life.
Parthenogenesis.
Well, we've all individual life has
asexual.
their own individual soul.
Huge success in claims in the last
All like,
quarter today.
all living beings have their own individual divine being.
We have the appearance of it.
And then there's
And
the
that
opposite.
is Maya, the appearance of separation.
One part of it.
And that's the delusion that we're living in, the matrix.
Well, see, we're so separated because people are not coming to us spiritually. We're
Take a break, get them
humans as a whole.
I just want to close up the discussion at this stage as far as the presentation. Thank you very much. again. We have tea in the kitchen, I don't know what else anybody thought, and just wanted to try to bring this in. Next month, on September 10th, Creation-Centered Spirituality, an examination of the philosophy of Matthew Fox and Hildegard of Bingen by Titus Jayasekar. Do you know his name?
I know Titus. He comes from, well, I've seen him at Blavatsky Lodge.
Yes, anyway, he's coming up from Sydney. I didn't schedule the speaker, and I can't pronounce it. Jayasekara.
He's Indian.
Okay, anyway. So that's on for next month. And hopefully everyone can come along and see. Thank you very much. Thank
Enough people come to the group. Enough people come to the group. There's problems.
That's it. But see, the push at the moment by the Americans is against them, and you have embryo cells rather than
When you're asking
like the wall, like you go to one place, you go to another country, you're all have actually collective something together.
it might be easier to use embryo cells. It may not very nervous.
That's all right, don't worry about the noses. That's good.
I don't think I'll be up to
You think you'd be able to go to his place? Six women, one night. Sorry, six women. They weren't living these human robots. They're actually destroyed the next day. So, human flesh is supposedly destroyed. This is by the creators. Wonderful beings, aren't they?
It doesn't look like.
They got over 60,000 members. So, and because he's got this embassy on the type of thing, he goes to
I think the biggest problem is the argument not scientific precedent. Totally.
Not with like science fiction
To suggest
but
that
the full picture.
memory retention is a possibility. Scientific.
Yeah. But
I wouldn't mind
compared to
more of my one in the library, no, it's got
like we're
I've seen it that having a book of fraud before the point of this book. The only argument they have against it is the fact that there's other scientists who was listed in the bibliography, and they were trying to look at hundreds of laws. But this one jumped on him and sued him to death. And that was the only thing that ever said, was it possible? If you look at the facts in the 1950s and 1960s, they were actually finding frogs and succeeding in the early 1962. And you look at the work of Mendel's with the life and that was science fiction.
The shower,
If I've suspected that. Yeah, there's still that.
In the next breath, they're saying that
Yeah, but
it was so simple
But
to...
if it's like a you were to if one of you will
less than 90%, then with their colour.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, well, your share was it, 90%?
That's a rough one, but it's in the 90s.
That's a lot, yeah, I mean, there's
I don't think we
little
can,
differences.
we can't exhaust the discussion
But what do you
tonight.
think?
We have to spend.
Yeah, but having
we
you
don't think
today.
Print it out, the genetic structure, that we give it back.
Either genetic.
Start to print it out, and they got these
It's a human genome project,
drawers,
yeah.
and hard copy, and they pull out these sheets, and there's bags and bags of drawers, and he says, we're up to about 5% of them overboard.
But then that was, what was it? When did that...
Yeah.